It was a regular day at the Shinmei Ryu School of Shortmanship, and Tsuruko was actually had just been taking care of some students, and this after they had left. She was standing at the courtyard, looking at the sky by herself, and just feeling proud that she had been taking care of her family, dojo, and if that even that even though she felt proud of keeping her family's dojo as active as much as she can do. And she's very at least happy to be proud of being such a skilled fighter. For the past few months, Tsuruko had been speed dating to try to find a partner since she felt a bit lonely despite having her family's dojo taken care of. But as she realized she was getting older and she wanted to maybe find someone to get married with and even maybe start a family with. So some of her other friends had recommended that she try speed dating. And of course, she was not much skilled or experience in that kind of thing. So before she decided to do so, she actually read up some about how speed dating works and what kind of rules there are and how long each meeting are and perhaps what potential to find any potential partner in that particular speed dating. After she found that there is a local speed dating in area, she decided to maybe give it a try. But after though, she went to this location and there was a lot of different guys and different girls, and some of us were around her age, some were maybe a couple of years younger. But despite that, she was willing to give this a try, at least maybe that she could find someone to be with. She just wanted to be happy, but to be maybe get married with someone someday. Despite that, though, she had even admit to her own family and her friends that she was a lesbian. And but she was actually very not surprised that her family was actually supportive to that community. But she herself had even come out to her family because she knows that they would support, but she was just too busy. And since her parents are sometimes occupied with something else, and she hasn't had enough time to spend with them or her sister Motoko. Motoko, though, and of course Tsuruko were very close. And even though that Motoko is probably only one that knows about her sister to be a lesbian, she was just happy. But there are, even though that Motoko could sense that she is a bit lonely, but she always keep up an act. She is always smiling, even pretending to be such happy. But even her heart, she was heartbroken. Because only about a few years earlier, she had a boyfriend, but it didn't work out as such as she had hoped for. Because she spent more time at the family dojo rather than with her boyfriend. At first, he didn't mind cause that, but since it became was that she tried to spend more time at the family dojo rather with her own boyfriend, it was getting tearing apart their relationship. But when she realized what happened, she tried to save the relationship, but it was too late. Her boyfriend had always given her an option: stay with him, give the relationship a try, and stop going work at the family dojo as much as she do. But since she had given her family a promise to keeping the family dojo active as much as possible and training new students, she couldn't break that promise to her parents. So she had only one option, and that she broke up with her boyfriend, despite she wanted to be with him. But after a while, though, she moved on from that, and even her family was very heartbroken for her seeing the older daughter had been broken up with her boyfriend. But as she tried to keep going on by taking care of keeping the family dojo, which something that actually helped her to cope during this heartbreak, and it actually helped her a lot though. But despite having been alone for about a year or so, she started feeling a bit more lonely, and she just wanted to be happy again, to feel being in love. But despite that, she has been trying to some being busy with taking care of the dojo. She just wanted to be happy again. And at the speed dating, before they started, she actually noticed one particular girl that she knows about, actually a friend of Botoko, and that was actually Otohime. Otohime was actually a very good friend to her sister, though. And even so surprising, she knew that Otohime was in fact a lesbian too. She knows about that. But even though Otohime didn't even know that Tsuruko was in fact lesbian. Because even though when the speed dating started, Tsuruko ended up with some guys when she didn't felt any sort of connection to. Because after shortly her breakup with her boyfriend, she realized that she was more into girls rather from to guys. So she maybe tried to figure out if there was any type of girl that she preferred to. Someone who is brave, tough, like herself, maybe who is proud of her family work, her family name, and sort of things. Even though that she tried to find some dates, some girls, but she actually did that mostly in secret. She did date only maybe two or three other girls, but most of those days didn't last per couple of weeks and months at the most. So after even the third time she found trying to find a girlfriend to be with, she decided to put dating on hold for some time being and focus on the family dojo. But after being a while of this since been single for about a year or so, she decided it was time to get out into open market to find a girlfriend this time. Even despite she did mention to some of the guys that she had been matched up to that she was more into girls than guys. So even though some guys were disappointed because they felt some sort of affection towards her, but when she told them that she preferred girls rather than guys, they were a little bit disappointed, but they were respectful. But and near the end, Tsuruko actually ended up with Otohime. Both really surprised that they actually end up at the same table. Despite that, even Otohime was actually had told a lot of their friends and family she was a lesbian. But they actually had a decent conversation. They talked almost about anything. Some of their common interests, like in music, food, and what they like to do in their free time when they don't work or something. Despite though that Tsuruko didn't even find any sort of special someone at the speed dating, but she tried to maybe give it another try. But she decided to wait maybe a couple of days before going back though. But after speed dating was over, she actually went to spend more time with Otohime. They actually take a walk together back before they went back to the family dojo. Even though they were just having a time to talking, even though Tsuruko invited um, Otohime for some tea, which she accepted. They were actually very really excited to be spending some time. They had been actually spent time in sometimes in the past, so they knew a lot about each other. But even though this was actually their first time when she admitted that she is a lesbian to someone else, not part of the family. But despite having that, Otohime was really surprised about. She was actually very outspoken herself. She has a funny personality. She was funny girl to be with. And then Tsuruko just randomly asked if she had any someone to be with. like a girlfriend or maybe a fiance or something that she didn't even heard about. But Otohime actually admitted that she was actually single herself. She hasn't even been focused on finding a special someone like at the moment. So Tsuruko asked her if she was even focused on to find some special someone. Why was she at the speed dating in the first place? She tried to explain that she was there to just see if that there was any potential girl that she may catch her eye on. She usually spent maybe pop out on the speed dating for a couple of times in a month to see if there's any girl that may catch her attention or something that she felt some sort of connection to. But despite that, she felt so far no either connection except one particular girl, and it turned out to be the Tsuruko. She felt some sort of connection to her because they knew each other for quite some time, and despite that Tsuruko was a bit older than Otohime, but they actually had a good time on there having tea. And even a couple of days later, Otohime were talking to her friend Motoko, and she actually tells her about this speed dating, where when she was somehow matched with her older sister Tsuruko. Motoko was completely unaware that her older sister had been on a speed dating, but nevertheless to be end up matched with her friend. And even though Motoko did ask if something did happen between them, like if they're dating or something, she said if they would be dating, she would actually be very supportive because she knows both of that her friends, her sister would actually treat Otohime really well. And actually that even though Otohime didn't mention this, but she did say she had only thought about maybe dating her friend's older sister, since after all she is gorgeous, she is funny, and even skilled fighter. You know, so if someone been trying to harm her, she will able to fight her off them. But even despite this, she had even considered being dating anyone at the moment. But deep down in Otohime's heart, she actually had fallen in love with Tsuruko. For at least for about a year or so, about almost 6 months or for almost like that, she actually been had a crush on her. But she didn't exactly expect him to be on a matched with Tsuruko at the speed dating. But after some time, Tsuruko has still been thinking about Otohime. Otohime was to her as a very perfect girl to be with. Very outspoken, very friendly, but most of all, funny. They shared so much things in common. But she was just not really sure if Otohime would consider being her because she's a bit older. Some girls prefer to be someone close to their own age, maybe as 1 or 2 years older, or maybe 1 year younger. And since Otohime hasn't even told her or has even officially asked her out, she didn't even bother to even telling her though. But one day, Otohime actually went to the dojo. She just wanted to talk to Tsuruko about something like anything. When she mentioned about this that she had been thinking about her lately and she asked her out, and even though she almost expected maybe as a no for an answer, but to Tsuruko, more the opposite. She actually said yes. She would like to go out with her. So they decided to go out the same evening to a restaurant which there was no located no close by to the dojo. And since Tsuruko was actually following this her traditional Japanese lifestyle, culture, and even morals, so she thought maybe they could go to this traditional Japanese restaurant in the area. So even though Otohime actually agreed. They actually had a blast of a great time at the restaurant. They actually had such great time. They actually had no problem to be finding us something to talk about. They talked about almost anything, like their common interest in music, their type of food, and they actually had such great time. Even after they left the restaurant, they were just talking and laughing together. And then, just before when they were about to near the no close by to the dojo, Otohime actually asked if she wanted to go out with her again, maybe to the movies or something, maybe on the Friday. And of course, she said yes. And after this second date, they made it official. They were a couple. And even though that their friends and families were now aware about it being dating, and they were serious about it though, because after all this, it turned out that Otohime has been waiting for someone like Tsuruko. Because one time, when they were on a walk in the park in the evening, well, this guy who tried to rob them by showing a pistol in front of their faces, to like demanded their values like cell phones, the wallets, or any valuable. But Tsuruko actually wasn't even terrified. She wasn't even intimidated by this guy. And in fact, she said only in a few lines, "Leave, or you will end up in hospital." And the guy, he just started laughing because he didn't even believe this older girl who demanding him to leave before something would happen. And he then pointed a gun at her and said, "Try me. I dare you to try me." And before he can even finish, she attacked him by smacking him right in the face with his knuckles and in the throat, made him stop breathing for only a short moment, and she kicked him in between the legs and he fell to the ground. And luckily though, Otohime managed to call for the police and they arrested the guy. And even despite that, Otohime was terrified, but she saw how calm Tsuruko were and how easily she took care of the guy. She felt protected and she felt from that moment she believed and even felt she didn't have to be worried anymore if something like this would happen. She felt really happy to have Tsuruko in her life. But it happened though that Tsuruko couldn't see Otohime for a couple of days, maybe a week or two sometimes, because that she had her to take care of the family's dojo by training some students and even take care of that when it was closed. And of course, even though that Tsuruko actually wanted to spend more time with her girlfriend, but it happened that she may have to spend time with her family with some traditional things, and especially during the first winter together being together as a couple. Tsuruko's family had actually invited Otohime to celebrate Christmas with them. She actually said yes, and despite that they actually had already met her a couple of times before when they had been dating, this was actually the very first time they actually had celebrated this with her own family. She wasn't even scared or nervous anymore because the very first time when they were introduced to Tsuruko's parents, she was a little bit nervous. But after that, she had met them for a couple of times before, she wasn't even nervous anymore. The opposite. She was really happy to have been accepted by the family, and even despite that Tsuruko's mother had jokingly said, "When will be the marriage wedding be?" At least Murutoko was a little bit annoyed by this question, and even though Tsuruko usually is calm and not even reacting most of these things, she said, "Not again, Mom. Have you tried to figure out maybe one day when we are both ready? After all, I have taken care of the family dojo, and I doesn't mean to keep the promise." Even so, despite though in Tsuruko's mind, she wanted to be married with Otohime. Otohime, she actually also wanted to be married with Tsuruko, but there were some things between them that they wanted to wait. Not because of the age difference, but there were some things like they weren't even living together. They hadn't even been dating for nearly about a year by that point. And even though they were to get married, they had promised each other to at least been dating for at least a couple of years to be sure if this relationship could work. And after they've been dating for about 4 years, Tsuruko actually had invited Otohime to the dojo to have some tea, and during the evening when they were having the tea, she actually proposed to Otohime. And all she said was actually just yes. She started crying as well. Even both families, especially Tsuruko's family, was really proud to have that their daughter had made the big question. Well, despite that, they had even tried to convince her maybe it was time to ask her for at least maybe once or twice for almost each year. But after that, Tsuruko said, "It's enough of that now. I will do it when I feel ready," which then her parents stopped even nagging about this. At least they don't have to be doing that because since Otohime and Tsuruko was getting married. Because only about a few weeks later they actually had their traditional Japanese wedding. And it was a great time. Despite that, even when they're on the honeymoon, Tsuruko closed the dojo for about a week so that she could spend some honeymoon with her new wife, which wasn't really much a problem. The rest of the family, like their parents and Mototoko, looked after the place while she was away, even though the school was closed, but they made sure it was clean enough that there weren't any problems. And after they had been married for about nearly 4 years, Mototoko and Tsuruko and Otohime actually wanted to start a family. They actually decided to adopt some children. And they went to adoption agency, and after some time, they managed to adopt two daughters who were twins about the age 10. Only 2 years later, they actually adopted a boy but age 9. Despite having this family though, Tsuruko would still continue to work at and keeping their family's dojo. And even Otohime, she continued her work as a barista and just there, despite that, they had a blast of a time. They were actually very happy that they both admitted their feelings for each other. And if Tsuruko hadn't even been at this speed dating, she would never have encountered at least Otohime there. It meant and also made had events sparked their potential for relationship. Even though despite maybe had met her at some point later on in a different place, maybe at in a hot dog house or something other like that. But Tsuruko, she was really excited to have Otohime as her wife, as her wife. Not only that, to have two daughters and one son with her. It is something that she really wished she would have. And Otohime, she couldn't have not been happier to be with someone like Tsuruko, always protecting her, and especially the time when they went in the park when the guy tried to rob them, which never happened or never occurred because she stopped him before anything could happen. And that is what made Otohime love Tsuruko even more. And this is how Tsuruko and Otohime, for the true love, got a big family together. The end.